The suffocating air of the courtroom felt heavy, but it was shattered the moment the man I used to call my father spoke up. "My name is Audrey. I am 29 years old, and I never imagined I would be standing in a county courthouse fighting against my own flesh and blood." We were in the middle of a tense conservatorship hearing. My parents were desperately trying to strip away my legal independence to seize control of the massive inheritance my grandfather left entirely to me. My father stood arrogantly at the witness stand. He looked around the room and declared, "Everything that old man owned is mine." Right on cue, my mother chimed in from her seat. She put on a fake, tragic expression and added, "My daughter has mental issues and can't handle the inheritance." I didn't cry or argue. I just kept my posture perfectly straight, picked up a thick brown envelope from my table and walked directly up to the bench. "You should see this first," I said quietly, handing it to the judge. The judge opened the flap and pulled out the contents. His stern expression instantly shifted into pure shock. He scanned the first page slowly, lowered the papers, stared dead at my father for a long moment, and then he let out a loud, sarcastic laugh. My father's smug smile vanished instantly. "Have you ever been completely betrayed by the people who were supposed to protect you? If you want to find out exactly what was inside that envelope and how I publicly humiliated my greedy family for good, hit that subscribe button like this video and keep watching. Trust me, you won't want to miss a single second of this revenge." My childhood was always tied to the smell of damp soil and the endless cornfields at the farm of my grandfather Edwin. While I stayed behind, dedicating my life to learning how to operate heavy agricultural machinery and managing complex harvest cycles, the rest of my blood relatives completely abandoned this place. My father, Eric, and my mother, Deborah, packed up and moved to the city decades ago. They chased a lavish, high-maintenance lifestyle funded by credit cards and empty promises. My older brother Oliver quickly followed in their footsteps, preferring expensive suits and corporate parties over honest work. To them, the agricultural estate was never a home. It was merely a bank account waiting to be cashed out. The tension regarding money was a constant shadow over the property. I vividly remember countless evenings sitting near the home office listening to my father argue over the telephone. He relentlessly pressured my grandfather to sell off large parcels of our prime farmland. My father needed quick cash to pay off mounting city debts and fund his failing business ventures. "You are sitting on a gold mine and you stubbornly refuse to help your own son cover a few bad investments," my father yelled through the receiver during one particularly heated exchange. "This land is a legacy built for the next generation, not a bailout fund for your reckless spending habits." My grandfather replied calmly, immediately disconnecting the call. Those demands only stopped when my grandfather fell seriously ill and had to be admitted to the county hospital. His health deteriorated rapidly over a matter of days. During those grim weeks, I practically lived in the sterile waiting room monitoring his care. That was the exact time frame when I officially met my grandfather's lawyer, Helen. She was a sharp, focused woman carrying a thick leather briefcase. She frequently visited the hospital room, always asking the nursing staff for absolute privacy. Helen would close the heavy wooden door to hold secret discussions with him regarding complex trust procedures, asset protection, and legal contingencies. I never interrupted, trusting his judgment entirely. Meanwhile, my parents and Oliver showed absolute indifference to the dying man's actual physical health. They treated the critical care unit like a waiting room for an impending payout. During one of his extremely rare visits, my father did not even sit by the hospital bed. Instead, he drove back to the farmhouse and attempted to bypass the lock on the heavy steel document safe hidden inside the study. I caught him actively twisting the combination dial, offering a weak excuse about looking for medical insurance papers. My mother spent her time cornering the attending physicians in the hallway. She discreetly fished for information about the exact timeline of his decline, rather than discussing potential treatment options. Oliver acted even more brazenly. I walked into the hospital room unannounced one afternoon and caught him secretly taking photographs of sensitive financial statements and bank letters my grandfather had left on the bedside table. The inevitable tragedy struck late on a Tuesday night when his heart finally failed. The funeral took place very quickly. It lacked any genuine warmth or real tears from my immediate family. As soon as the casket was lowered into the earth, their brief facade of mourning dropped completely. Returning to the property immediately after the burial service, my parents and Oliver did not offer any comfort. They began pacing around the main house, calculating the value of the antique furniture and staring hungrily out at the sprawling cornfields. They circled the estate like vultures, waiting for their prey, completely unaware of the legal wall my grandfather had already built. A few days after the funeral, Helen organized the official reading of the will right in the living room of the farmhouse. She sat in my grandfather's old leather armchair, calmly unsealing the document, and bypassed all unnecessary pleasantries. The declaration she read was absolute. My grandfather had legally transferred 100% ownership of the sprawling Iowa corn farm, the heavy machinery inventory, and the entire financial trust directly to me. My parents were completely excluded from accessing a single cent, and Oliver received absolutely nothing. The atmosphere in the living room instantly dropped in temperature. I watched my father's face turn a dangerous shade of red. Oliver gripped the edges of the wooden dining table so hard his knuckles turned white. They were visibly furious, exchanging bitter glares, but they maintained a terrifying silence as Helen formally packed her briefcase, handed me my copies, and left the property. Instead of throwing a tantrum and driving back to the city, they quickly shifted their strategy to a slow invasion. My father forced a painfully fake, sympathetic smile and approached me by the kitchen counter later that evening. "We will stay for a few days to help you handle this pile of complicated paperwork," he stated, refusing to break eye contact. That promised timeline was a deliberate lie. The so-called few days rapidly turned into several weeks, and they showed absolutely no intention of packing their luggage. My parents systematically occupied the master bedroom and the guest suites, aggressively expanding their presence across every square inch of the property. They began acting as if they were the true owners of the estate. I was suddenly being treated like a hired farmhand who merely rented a small room in the back hallway. Oliver adopted a different tactic to systematically undermine my authority on the property. He did not jump directly into operating the heavy tractors or doing any actual physical labor out in the muddy fields. Instead, he faked a supportive role by constantly auditing my daily operations and shadowing my every move. I walked into the main storage barn one afternoon and found him aggressively tearing apart my inventory system. "How are you managing this warehouse? The fertilizer is all in the wrong place. Let me reorganize it for you." He criticized, projecting a tone of false superiority. His interference did not stop at merely rearranging pallets of agricultural supplies. Oliver started intercepting my scheduled meetings with our long-term suppliers. He would actively step into my private conversations with local grain buyers, question my pricing decisions aloud, and continuously hint to our business partners that my management skills were dangerously weak. He deliberately planted seeds of doubt regarding my competence to run the massive corn operation. While Oliver attacked my professional credibility outside, my father executed a far more sinister move inside the farmhouse. Returning from a long morning in the fields, I walked down the main hallway and found a local locksmith drilling into the thick oak door of the family record room to install a heavy commercial deadbolt. That specific room held decades of the farm's financial history, the original property deeds, and all our tax records. When I confronted my father about the sudden security upgrade, he did not even flinch. He smoothly claimed he needed to protect our important documents from potential theft now that the property was transitioning. He then pocketed the only 2 keys the locksmith handed over. By physically barring my entry to that room, my father officially started the aggressive process of isolating me from my own legal and financial control. 2 months passed since the day they aggressively moved in, and my physical health began to inexplicably deteriorate. I experienced strange symptoms of profound exhaustion and sluggishness that I had never felt before, even during the most demanding agricultural seasons. I could barely keep my eyes open past sunset. My mother suddenly developed an obsessive evening routine. Every single night at exactly 8 o'clock, she would blend a thick green vitamin smoothie and bring it directly to my desk. She would stand there watching my throat swallow, insisting that the expensive organic supplements would significantly reduce my stress levels from managing the estate. I trusted her maternal instincts at first. However, the results completely contradicted her health claims. Instead of waking up refreshed, I constantly found myself dragging my heavy body out of bed, suffering from splitting headaches, severe dizziness, and a terrifying mental fog that made reading simple invoices impossible. While I struggled to maintain my daily focus, Oliver actively escalated his sabotage out in the sprawling cornfields. He no longer just criticized my inventory management. One afternoon, he took a wrench and claimed he was performing routine preventative maintenance on our primary irrigation system. The very next morning, the main control panel flashed a critical error, indicating a massive pressure failure across 50 acres. My father did not investigate the mechanical logs or question Oliver's repair work. He immediately cornered me in the kitchen, aggressively weaponizing the equipment failure to directly attack my declining cognitive state. "You are getting too confused lately. That water valve you forgot to close yesterday almost flooded the entire storage unit." My father reprimanded, crossing his arms and shaking his head in mock disappointment. The psychological pressure was suffocating until my best friend Sarah unexpectedly drove her truck up the dirt driveway to check on my well-being. She walked onto the front porch, took one long look at my face, and immediately recognized the alarming physical changes. She pointed out my visibly trembling hands holding a coffee mug, my unusually slow conversational reflexes, and the dark, heavy circles under my sleep-deprived eyes. Sarah completely ignored my mother's forced hospitality and polite excuses about farm fatigue. She grabbed my jacket, pulled me out of the farmhouse, and dragged me into the empty equipment barn away from any eavesdropping ears. "Are you sure they aren't sneaking something into your drinks at night? You don't look like the Audrey I know," Sarah whispered, her voice laced with deep concern and suspicion. Her blunt warning acted like a bucket of ice water, instantly shattering the thick mental fog surrounding my clouded judgment. The terrifying realization hit me that my sudden cognitive decline perfectly aligned with my mother's persistent new evening routine. I needed to test Sarah's horrifying theory. That evening, when my mother handed me the usual green smoothie with a warm, deceptive smile, I forced a grateful expression and took the tall glass directly into my bedroom. I locked the door behind me. Instead of swallowing the thick liquid, I carried it straight to the adjoining bathroom and quietly dumped the entire contents down the sink drain. I ran the cold water tap for several minutes to wash away any lingering chemical residue. The following morning, I woke up with absolute clarity, completely free from the debilitating headache and the heavy sluggishness. With my mind finally sharp and alert again, I silently navigated the farmhouse corridors, carefully observing every single hushed conversation and suspicious movement my so-called family made. One Saturday evening, when the entire house drove into town to attend a high-stakes casino fundraising event, I finally seized my opportunity. I retrieved my grandfather's hidden spare key from the garage toolbox and used it to unlock the heavy oak door of the master bedroom. I systematically searched through their personal belongings, moving with calculated precision to avoid leaving any trace of my presence. Deep inside my mother's leather suitcase, buried underneath a thick pile of old winter sweaters, my fingers brushed against a cold glass surface. I pulled out a heavy prescription bottle with the pharmacy label violently scratched off to hide the patient name. A quick internet search of the pill's shape and engraved identification numbers confirmed my absolute worst fears. It was a highly potent prescription sedative, a medication typically administered in controlled environments for severe psychiatric episodes. The horrifying discoveries did not end inside that suitcase. I shifted my attention to my father's locked briefcase sitting on the desk, easily prying the flimsy metal clasps open with a small flathead screwdriver. Inside, I found a printed conservatorship checklist with several demanding legal requirements, aggressively crossed out in red ink. Clipped securely behind that checklist was a thick stack of printed email exchanges. The correspondence was between my father and an unethical private psychiatrist, discussing my fictional symptoms and shamelessly negotiating a cash price for a clinical diagnosis without ever conducting an in-person evaluation. Beneath the medical forgery lay the ultimate motive driving their criminal conspiracy. I uncovered a detailed financial ledger documenting my father's astronomical gambling debts, owed to dangerous creditors totaling hundreds of thousands of dollars. The sheer scale of their malicious plot made my blood run completely cold. They were not merely trying to steal the agricultural estate. They were actively plotting to strip away my fundamental human rights and lock me inside a chemical prison. I immediately grabbed my phone and called Sarah, frantically throwing the unmarked pills, the printed emails, and the financial debt ledger into a heavy canvas backpack. I am already waiting outside the main farm gate. Grab everything you found and get out to the truck right now, Sarah instructed sharply through the receiver. I sprinted across the dark gravel yard, jumped into the passenger seat, and we drove away from the isolated property under the cover of night. Early the following morning, Sarah drove me directly to Helen's downtown law office. I dumped the heavy backpack onto the polished mahogany conference table, watching the experienced lawyer carefully examine the forged medical documents and the unprescribed pills. Helen's expression hardened as she rapidly connected the pieces of the sinister puzzle. She officially confirmed that my father was actively building a fraudulent medical portfolio designed to declare me legally incompetent in front of a county judge. They are aiming for a full conservatorship. We have to stay one step ahead of them by securing independent medical evaluations immediately, Helen stated, tapping her pen against the printed checklist. Following her strict legal guidance, Sarah and I spent the rest of the week visiting 2 different top-tier medical centers located in the neighboring city. I willingly submitted myself to rigorous neurological exams, extensive psychological evaluations, and comprehensive blood panels to verify that no illicit substances remained in my system. The senior neurologists ran every available diagnostic test, thoroughly documenting my excellent mental acuity and sharp executive functioning. I walked out of the second hospital holding certified airtight medical documents proving my absolute sanity. I had finally secured the ultimate legal weapon necessary to completely destroy their carefully constructed web of lies. 1 month before the scheduled court date, I returned to the isolated farm and fully committed to playing the exact role they desperately expected: a confused, mentally fragile victim completely incapable of functioning independently. During a brief window when my family took a weekend shopping trip to the city, I secretly hired a specialized private security technician. He worked rapidly to install a covert network of high-definition micro-cameras, meticulously hiding the tiny lenses inside the upper kitchen cabinets, behind the spice racks, and directly overlooking the main preparation counter. A few days later, these hidden cameras perfectly captured undeniable high-resolution footage of my mother standing alone in the kitchen, stealthily crushing heavy prescription sedatives with a spoon and stirring the dangerous white powder directly into my evening meals. I deliberately acted increasingly absent-minded around the farmhouse to continuously feed their dangerous illusion. I purposefully misplaced my phone in bizarre locations, stared blankly at essential agricultural invoices for hours, and purposely steered conversations completely off topic during our tense family dinners. My fabricated cognitive decline provided Oliver with the perfect opportunity to aggressively step into the leadership void. I offered absolutely no verbal or physical resistance when he arrogantly bypassed my authority to negotiate with our suppliers. He eagerly signed a premature, highly disadvantageous corn sale contract, foolishly selling our entire upcoming autumn harvest to a local commercial distributor at a ridiculously cheap price. I silently let him execute this terrible financial decision, knowing his blatant mismanagement would perfectly solidify the false narrative they were actively building to present to the judge. Witnessing my carefully engineered physical and mental weakness, my father became overwhelmingly confident in his sinister legal strategy. He completely dropped his facade of paternal concern. He eagerly contacted his fraudulent attorney and officially filed an emergency petition at the county courthouse, legally demanding to strip away all my property rights and banking access by officially claiming I completely lacked the basic mental capacity to manage the massive agricultural estate. Did you forget where your car keys are again? Your condition is getting worse every day. Just let me handle the court business today, my father said condescendingly one morning, snatching the metal ring from the kitchen counter while giving my mother a highly victorious, sickeningly confident smirk. Far away from the suffocating environment of the property, my lawyer Helen was meticulously finalizing the logistics of our ultimate counterattack. She systematically organized the thick brown envelope, transforming a simple piece of ordinary stationery into a devastatingly precise legal weapon. Helen neatly stacked the certified independent medical reports proving my sanity, the copied financial debt ledgers exposing my father's gambling problem, and a secure flash drive holding both the damning kitchen surveillance video and a very specific previously unreleased audio recording left behind by my late grandfather. Everything is already packed securely inside this envelope. Today we are going to end this mess once and for all, Helen promised me through a secure phone call the night before the trial, her steady voice projecting absolute legal certainty. The morning of the conservatorship hearing finally arrived, with heavy clouds hanging over the Iowa farm. My parents emerged from their bedrooms wearing expensive custom-tailored suits, projecting the perfect image of a wealthy, respectable family stepping up to care for their sick relative. They put on a sickeningly sweet, exaggerated, sympathetic performance for the farm workers outside, gently holding my arms and guiding my seemingly fragile body into the back seat of their luxury SUV. I did not utter a single word or show a shred of emotion during the long drive to the courthouse, silently staring out the tinted window and counting down the exact minutes until their entire fabricated world collapsed. Back inside the suffocating courtroom, time seemed to completely freeze as the judge slowly pulled the thick stack of documents out of the brown envelope. Up until this exact second, my father and his corrupt attorney had been dominating the hearing, aggressively projecting absolute victory. They had painted a convincing, tragic picture of a severely mentally ill daughter desperately needing urgent legal intervention to survive. Helen immediately stood up and shattered their entire fabricated reality. She formally submitted the certified independent medical evaluations directly to the court clerk. She carefully explained that the comprehensive neurological assessments and clean toxicology panels explicitly proved my brain was perfectly healthy. The top-tier hospital reports confirmed my executive functioning was exceptionally sharp, instantly destroying their core argument regarding my supposed mental incapacity and exposing their private doctor's diagnosis as a complete fraud. My father began to visibly panic, shifting nervously in his leather chair, while his attorney frantically flipped through the undeniable medical proof. His confident posture completely crumbled when Helen submitted her next crucial piece of evidence, formally requesting permission to use the courtroom's multimedia projector. The opposing lawyer attempted to raise a frantic verbal objection, but the judge immediately overruled him, demanding to see the evidence. A heavy, stunned silence fell over the packed public gallery as the high-definition hidden camera footage began playing on the large screen. The crisp video clearly displayed my mother standing alone in the farmhouse kitchen, methodically crushing potent prescription sedatives with a heavy metal spoon and deliberately mixing the dangerous white powder into my daily vitamin smoothie. My mother physically shrank into her seat, covering her pale, terrified face with her trembling hands as the undeniable proof of her systematic poisoning played on a continuous loop. Recognizing the severe criminal implications, my father's attorney physically took a step away from his own clients. Judge Marcus Davis slammed his wooden gavel down against the bench with explosive force, his face red with absolute judicial outrage. He immediately and vehemently rejected the emergency conservatorship petition, glaring down at my parents with pure disgust for attempting to manipulate the legal system to facilitate their horrific physical abuse. This family is an absolute disgrace. Not only am I denying this petition, but I am forwarding this entire case file to the prosecutor's office for a full criminal investigation. Judge Marcus Davis declared sharply, his authoritative voice echoing fiercely across the large room. Helen was not finished dismantling them. The final nail in their collective coffin was the secure audio file she extracted from the provided USB drive. The courtroom speakers crackled to life, and the unmistakable raspy voice of my late grandfather echoed through the silent, tense space. The secret recording completely exposed the primary financial motive driving their sinister plot, explicitly detailing my father's massive underground gambling debts and his long-standing aggressive threats to liquidate the agricultural estate for quick cash. I know the true nature of my son. He would sell every single inch of this land to pay off his debts. Audrey is the only one who deserves this farm. The voice of my late grandfather declared from the recording, firmly securing my rightful legacy from beyond the grave. Hearing the irreversible destruction of their malicious scheme, Oliver completely lost his temper. He jumped up from his seat in the gallery and lunged aggressively toward the evidence table, desperately trying to snatch the USB drive from the laptop. He did not even make it halfway across the aisle. The armed court bailiff instantly intercepted the threat, tackling his heavy body hard against the solid wooden railing. The officer quickly twisted Oliver's arms behind his back, aggressively snapping heavy metal handcuffs onto his wrists and placing him under immediate arrest for violently disturbing the public order. Over half a year has passed since the heavy wooden gavel slammed down, permanently closing the dark chapter of my toxic bloodline. The criminal prosecutor's office moved swiftly and aggressively following the explosive conservatorship hearing. My parents were formally indicted, thoroughly tried, and ultimately sentenced to serve several years inside a maximum security state prison facility. They were officially found guilty on multiple severe felony charges, including extensive medical fraud, committing perjury in a court of law, and the intentional systematic poisoning of a family member. When the final verdict was read aloud, they cried and begged for a lighter punishment, but the judge showed absolutely zero mercy. Their carefully crafted image of high society wealth and superiority completely shattered behind cold steel bars. Oliver did not escape the catastrophic fallout, even though he narrowly avoided direct criminal poisoning charges. The sudden public exposure of the forged agricultural contracts he foolishly signed during my fake cognitive decline triggered a massive wave of aggressive civil lawsuits from our angry commercial partners. Drowning in overwhelming legal penalty fees and the massive inherited gambling debts previously hidden by my father Oliver was forcefully pushed into filing for absolute personal bankruptcy. The major commercial banks ruthlessly intervened. They seized his luxury downtown apartment, immediately repossessed his expensive sports cars right out of the parking garage, and forcefully liquidated every single financial asset he owned to cover the massive corporate liabilities. The arrogant man who tried to control my farming operations was left with absolutely nothing, permanently blacklisted from entering any corporate business environment. The county correctional facility frequently attempts to patch through, collect phone calls, and forward handwritten apology letters from my parents, but I rigidly refuse every single connection. I legally changed my emergency contacts completely, upgraded the perimeter security system at the property, and legally instructed the prison administration to permanently block their names from my communication list. I completely severed those poisonous biological ties without a single ounce of regret or hesitation. Instead of dwelling on their miserable existence, I redirected all my physical energy and sharp mental focus into successfully restoring the massive agricultural operations at the estate. I repaired the irrigation systems they damaged and ensured the seasonal harvest yielded record-breaking profits for our local community. Standing right in the middle of the endless golden cornfields today, listening to the powerful roaring engines of the massive combine harvesters echoing loudly under the clear Iowa sky, I fully understand the heavy lessons this brutal ordeal taught me. First, a biological family is not always a guaranteed safe haven. Sometimes, the very people who share your exact bloodline are the exact predators desperately trying to steal everything you possess. Second, securing absolute financial independence and aggressively protecting your mental clarity are the only unbreakable shields you can wield during a relentless storm of psychological manipulation. Most importantly, silent preparation and the methodical gathering of undeniable legal evidence will always remain the most destructive counterattack against anyone attempting to exploit your life. The cold wind blowing gently through the dry corn leaves officially closes my story at this beautiful farm. I sincerely thank you for patiently listening to my difficult journey for justice until the very last minute. What do you honestly think about my ruthless decision to permanently cut off my entire family? Please leave a comment and share your personal thoughts below.